Good morning.
Good.
Now, Ted Black, is that behind Harris? Or
No, it's on the north side of Grand River.
Right.
Just there's an access on Banata, north of
okay.
Grand River, and there's one you can't even see it, but if you if you act like you're going to turn into the Red Cedar Church and go to the next driveway, you're there.
Okay. I've been through there. It's been a while.
Yeah, me too.
It's a beautiful spot. It really is.
Nice.
You live near there, Elaine?
Well,
You live near Ted Black?
no, I had to drive over, but I live not too far. I live in Tacoma Hills.
Oh, okay.
Off of Hamilton Road.
Just the other day, I rode with Bill. I rode through. I hadn't realized that from Indian Lakes to the backside of Hannah Boulevard, you could connect. There are paths through there that you can connect. That was kind of fun.
I love that area.
So,
I'm kind of sad that it's going to be developed.
I know, me too.
That's why the Indian Lakes residents were all up in arms. And I'm going, what's their problem? Well, they back up to where they built that hotel, I guess, down the end of the boulevard there.
Right.
And apartments and stuff. And there's supposed to be more apartments going in, I think.
Right.
Are they really going to keep building apartments in view of what's going on?
It's a senior complex.
Oh, senior complex. Oh, not student.
No, we'll all end up there.
Yeah. Yes.
I go through there quite a bit because I go to the Mac, and it's just a convenient spot. I live about 1.5 miles from there, and it's if you want to get close to nature quickly. It's a nice spot.
Well, according to Bill, there's also the railroad trestle there, and when you cross over, it's you're just behind Ellison, basically. And so for kids living in that housing, they can bypass the whole going out to Hagedorn and working their way around if they walk across the trestle. So,
I didn't know there was a trestle in there.
Oh yeah, that's where the tracks cross the river. I mean, you don't have to walk on the tracks. There's sort of a sidewalk, but it's not really intended for pedestrian use.
We used to go over to the ledges all the time in Grand Ledge and walk across that trestle. Well, we weren't supposed to walk across that trestle, but kids always did. And I guess I was a little too skittish because it seemed like such a long bridge, and the chances of a train were pretty high in those days.
Well, this isn't that long a bridge, but anyway, it was just interesting.
Yeah, I used to live at the end of, I think that's Fidelity Lane there, near there.
Where's
that? And the train would come by and twice a day or whatever. It's kind of a cool little spot as well. Is that where that's not where the trail is gonna cross, is it?
I'm still a little unclear on that. I think Bill has a more accurate. I haven't seen a map. I have not understood exactly how the river crossing is going to happen.
I thought it was going to be behind those apartments there, maybe where that sewer siphon fixture is. Kind of near the School of Music.
Right.
Yeah, something like that, maybe.
But you still have to get across the river. Yeah, that's the part.
There's Rob, one of our sewer guys. Now he's our building person. Took me there one time, and there's a little siphon that goes underneath the river that takes all our sewage into East Lansing wastewater treatment plant. So it's a fairly big pipe. But I think we have some maybe right away there or something. But anyway, It'll be an exciting pathway to be completed at some point.
Oh yeah, I'm really looking forward to that. I mean, I've ridden through the undeveloped trail that goes down from, you know, when you depart from basically across the street from Nancy Moore.
I
And
love
some
that
of
area.
that is two track because there, you know, there is a sewer, what do they call it, lifter pump there. And I remember when they had to go in and redo it. So they sort of slightly improved that two track in there, but still, you know, you come out by Campus Hill Apartments.
Yeah,
That's actually a fairly nice little jaunt.
it is. I took that 2 days ago, and they had just mowed it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so
How
something's
civilized.
that. But yeah, I like to bike through there quite a bit, and nice area. Great place to see deer and wild turkeys and um, wild boar.
Wild boar? Wow,
No,
I've
I'm
never
just
seen
kidding.
one of them. There's some nice raspberries in there.
Bear and antelope, and all those. Eh?
Yeah, that's right. Giraffes.
Wolverine. I bet you saw a wolverine.
Well, we
Well,
have
what's our topic for today?
it's pretty
Yeah.
much what anybody wants to talk
Right.
about. A
Everyone's
couple of
on
our
vacation, I think.
couple of our fireballs are missing in action today, so we can. I'm here for as long as people want to chat. I tuned into the council meeting last night,
Mhm.
and Sarah wanted to talk about overgrown planted yards, you know, natural landscapes. She had some pictures she was going to share of a house in Mason she was intrigued by, but it's whatever anybody wants to talk about. I don't.
Well, I'm still curious about, you know, I think I mentioned this last week that I'd gone down past the MSU recycling place, and they don't seem to have a single-use plastics collection anymore, which they had for a while, but it was always full. So we sort of, for the last year and a half or so, have been just keeping all the plastic bags and just to sort of highlight to ourselves, you know, what a massive quantity of single-use plastic there is in the process of just acquiring groceries and so forth. And even if you try to be careful about it, there's, you know, you can recycle cardboard and things like that, the boxes that cereal comes in or whatever, but those plastic bags, there's just
So
nothing to do with them.
when you say single-use plastic, are you only talking about bags then?
Well, mostly bags, but there are other containers too. You know, if you buy, I don't know,
Oh,
berries
well,
or
yeah.
something like that,
Most
some of them are
plastic seems to
more
be
directly
single
recyclable.
use to me.
I'm sorry.
Well, so it's the bag containers that they didn't have out there. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah,
Well, at various times they don't.
right.
And
Well,
I'm not real sure why that is. But the guy had told me once, some time ago, that they collect what they can get money for.
right.
And if they can't sell it anywhere, then they're not going to collect it, I guess. And that's
Well,
why they don't do styrofoam there.
Right.
unfortunately, it all costs. So it's all costing them something.
It must be.
But not all of it, but
it must be, but they're still collecting, apparently.
yeah.
I mean, the irony is when you think about for example, the anaerobic digester and so forth, the food waste being converted to energy. I mean, at least that's a use. It's kind of definitely a downcycling, but it's still a use, and it disposes of it. But just from a chemical point of view, the energy content of a plastic bag on a mass basis is much larger than the energy content of all that food. I mean, a plastic bag is basically gasoline, but not in a form that you can sort of use. So, yeah, I just anyway, we were just looking for a way to recycle it.
There have been various plastic bag type products that you hear about once in a while that are not made from petroleum, that are plant-based product. Well, what's happening with that market, that process?
Well, they were making, for a little while, they were making, yeah, things like those berry boxes. I mean, things that would normally be made of PETE or something like that, the clear, relatively stiff plastic that you can, that does recycle reasonably well, from what's called polylactic acid. And that stuff does, if you grind it up, you can compost it. I mean, it does break down. But even composting has to, hi Emma, it does have to have the right circumstances. I mean, if it's in a sort of a dry compost, it's not going to go anywhere. It takes a while to break down.
Yeah.
But yeah.
But nobody's trying to make a bag then. Just hard containers.
Yeah, I'm not so sure about PLA bags. Maybe there are some. I don't know about that. The examples that I've seen are mostly the, as I said, the sort of harder plastic containers that you might, I don't know, that you'd typically see berries or something sold in.
Yeah.
There's probably a lot of research going on. I mean, the chemical companies are kind of clamoring to come up with something that's socially responsible, but before we ban it all.
Well, the problem now, of course, is that petroleum is its price is so low that there's very little economic driving force to come up with alternatives, which is a little bit sad. And the other thing that worries me about the whole COVID story is that now people are afraid to carpool and things like that because they don't want to be in a closed space with other non-bubble people, participants. So I do worry that we're going to see that much more in the way of single rider car usage, unfortunately.
There's the whole sanitary issue of disposable is, people, single use is something that's going up.
All of our households are behaving like hospitals now and throwing everything away.
Yeah, gloves and masks and everything else, right?
Yeah, I know here, even at the service center, we were urged to use single-use silverware. And after they had just specifically told us that dish soap does just fine at getting rid of, the virus on surfaces. So I kind of, politely said that I would not be doing that. But, I think that's just the atmosphere right now. And I mean, nurses, and doctors deal with so much every day, so much exposure to everything. And my mother-in-law's a nurse, and she's like, you just have good hygiene. So
right.
It's like we can find ways around that instead of trying to use all this single-use stuff. But
well, the thing is, I mean, in the old days, I mean, they used cotton or whatever, regular cloth, and they would sterilize it with autoclaves or whatever. I mean, it's not that it's not possible to be clean and sterile with reusable things. It's just that you have to have the equipment to do it. And we've sort of moved away from that because of the disposable, the ease of use of disposable products.
Our disposable world.
What's that? Yeah,
you said our disposable world.
But when you think about those products, they're aesthetically so much nastier. I mean, when you go in for some procedure, you're wrapped in this weird paper gown, and I mean, whatever.
There is some legislation being contemplated right now. I'm not sure exactly where it is, but you might have seen the last newsletter I put out. Part of the effort in the last, 20, 30 years has been making it easier to site landfills because we were running out of landfill space however many years ago that was. So we have one of the worst recycling rates in the country. because it's so cheap to put stuff in a landfill.
Michigan, you mean?
Right. We're still taking waste from Canada. So anyway, there's an effort to boost the recycling rate up to 35%. And if you get a chance to just take a look at that or call your legislator, I think it's a bipartisan supported initiative, but it's partly to address some of what we're talking about here today, because of our terrible recycling rates. Last week, we also talked about manufacturer responsibility, and I think Elaine mentioned autoclaves, or maybe it was.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's sort of like we're picking up on that conversation a little bit. You must have been tuning in to the vibes, Ned.
And just an FYI, I use the Sparrow Health system, and I've had a couple of procedures lately, tests done, and they give you they're still using fabric gowns there. They're not giving you paper ones, which was interesting.
Yeah, I think I'm always interested too, because like I've tried to reduce, like I have those unpaper towels and stuff like that. So my interest is always too in like the production of paper towels versus washing them over and over, which I mean, I don't know. I have a well too, so I don't pay for my water, and but I'm also still like, I feel very mindful about how much water I'm using also to wash all those products. So it's always, I don't know, there's always two sides, and I don't know.
At
I just
least
feel
two.
like there's always
interesting
so much
when you say
of.
you don't pay for your water, because we used to have a well too, and we figured we spent just as much in electricity to run the pump for the water that we would have spent on city water. So hey.
Yeah, and that may be true. I don't know, honestly, I'm kind of one of those people who I just pay my bill when it comes in. I don't always, check it out that much, but yeah. So, but that's the thing though, you use energy to wash and that as well, but I don't know which one is better, I guess.
Right. And that whole paper versus plastic bag thing. Paper seems so much more environmentally correct, but then you do the math and the chemistry, and you realize that that's not necessarily the most eco-friendly and I appreciate people like you, Emma, that are sort of diligent about it and have done some research, and all of you are that way. I'm maybe less so than all of the rest of you. But it's nice to have answers to some of these questions and people who've thought through it a little bit.
Yeah, that whole paper bag versus plastic thing was like a huge disappointment in my life. Because like you think, well, like I shred it up and throw it in my compost, so I'm always like, oh, that's great, but but I think it's good that people are actually having, like you said, Leroy, like people are actually having these conversations, and that's just like a huge step towards being more mindful about all of these things and starting conversations. Because this was a conversation I had with the girl at the checkout, so it's just good that people are starting to think about that and where everything comes from and where it goes.
Yeah. And
so
something, go ahead.
Go ahead. I was just going to say, so what do people know about, cities where plastic bags have been banned? Is that working? And what are the strategies that both sellers and buyers have developed to compensate or whatever to work around it? I mean, are people... I think New York City did that, right? Didn't they ban, or was it Chicago? One of the big cities. Actually,
it might have been Chicago. I really don't know a lot about that, but I know Chicago is doing a lot of intense green infrastructure and different sustainability measures.
Yeah, I was just curious about how those things have worked out. I mean, I'm always looking for examples of, for a blueprint, or at least for a framework that that one can.
Courtney and her son were
learn
researching
from.
this, and we're going to present. They did present some of that, I believe, at a recycling or a environmental commission meeting a while back, if I recall correctly. But
Who did that, you're saying?
Courtney Wazinski and her
Oh,
son,
yeah, right.
who may have just been appointed to our commission.
I know.
or
I'm
will
looking
be.
forward to that.
Kind of excited about their involvement, and but there's quite a few cities that have done that.
So do they require you to use your own bags, or are they using paper bags, or what? So what does that entail?
I don't recall all the details. I just remember one of the unintended consequences that is that people started buying more plastic bags. Because they wanted plastic bags for their trash, and prior to that they were using them for trash bags.
Oh, like Glad bags, Hefty bags.
I see. Yeah.
So,
we were in Hawaii about 7 or 8 years ago, and they were just starting to ban plastic bags on the different islands. Each island
for them.
Island making their own timetable for it, I think. And I don't know if all of them were on board or not. I didn't realize that the separate islands of Hawaii had any autonomy, amongst themselves, till I noticed that plastic bag ban, it was going into force on the Big Island and on Oahu, and I'm not sure if the other islands followed suit. And I really haven't heard anything about what's working and what's not.
My girlfriend, I could ask my girlfriend, she worked at Whole Foods on a couple of different islands in Hawaii.
What?
Really? Wow.
That's sweet.
And
that's awesome.
She told me about Whole Foods has a 10-cent bag credit if you bring your own bag in.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
We were told if we're Costco members, which we were, as soon as you land at the airport and get your car, go to the Costco store, because food is so expensive in Hawaii. But at Costco, they sell it for the same price that they do on the mainland.
Oh, really?
So you could barely get in the Costco parking lot, believe it. They had a big one. They had one in Kona, and there was another one in Hilo, I believe.
I didn't even know there was a Costco in Hawaii.
Oh, yeah.
I haven't been to Hawaii yet. Still on my big list.
Costco started on the West Coast, so I guess it stands to reason they'd be in Hawaii, too.
Makes sense. So I have, first, I don't know, I haven't gotten to do a lot of research on them, but Meijer does sell a brand of what they label as biodegradable garbage bags. They come in the bigger black ones and then the 13-gallon white bags. And I've only seen them at Meijer as far as just a, chain store goes. But then I also get these compost bags from Grove Collaborative, and I guess obviously cost, I'm sure, there's a higher cost of producing that kind of stuff. But if there are options like that out there, why aren't they integrated into these plastic bags more? I know Horrocks says that they, their plastic bags are, I don't know how many percentage of post-consumer or whatever, but these compost bags, I can just throw them in my compost. I can't even keep them in my trash for very long. I have to take my trash out more often because they'll start to degrade at the bottom. Yeah. Which, maybe that's part of it too. They can be a little flimsier, but to me, they work fine, but I don't know.
So how long? So they last a week or something in your trash can?
Well, yeah, and because that's the other thing is we recycle and compost so much that we don't really end up with a lot of trash. So by the end of the week, we're like, okay, we got to take it out anyway because it's starting to smell. And, you know, but that's the thing, is we really don't go through more than I think they're 13-gallon bags, and sometimes they're not even half full at the end of the week. So, but yeah, it'll start to just get like, you can tell, like thinner almost, like, like maybe it might fall out the bottom, but,
I mean, the whole
yeah,
practice of putting bags in a trash can anyway is, I mean, itself, you know, I would call that a relatively recent development itself. I mean, when I was a kid, we just had a trash can, and yeah, it would get dirty on the inside, but that's where the trash went anyway. So it wasn't, you know, once in a while you'd hose it out or something.
There was no plastic when I was a
Right.
kid.
Well, but I mean,
oh, wonderful.
No wraps. You used wax paper, and you used paper bags for stuff.
right, and you could line up a sort of a paper waste basket with a paper bag if you wanted to, but you didn't have to.
Yeah, most people didn't
When I
line
worked in the zoo, we just used great old trash buckets, and, you know, dumped them in the dumpster. We didn't have a container, you know, a liner.
No,
but now we take that for granted, that that's what you have to have.
Well, yeah, because I was going to say, I wonder if we could, like, this is something that more of like the waste collection companies, like, because I use Granger, and they say, and I mean, they've never like told me I can't throw anything in without a bag, but they do tell you when you sign up, they're like, you can have 3 trash bags full in your can. And so they already like give that idea of like, you have to have everything bagged up. So I wonder if that's something that could be more of a conversation with those companies of what can we do to like reduce that waste, or because I know that Granger is at least pretty open to like, they have a program for their employees where their employees can bring different environmental focused ideas to them, and they, you know, they have to like do like a little presentation, and they can like incorporate it company wide. So I don't know, maybe that's something that they could, I don't know, handle, like they have the reach already with that, but I don't know. It's interesting to think about.
Charles Hauser is the kind of the outreach guy with Granger right now, and he's been very responsive. And they do a weekly or bi-weekly newsletter, but he's also offered to meet with us and talk about how we can promote recycling. And, you know, they've got a nice information distribution network, and they certainly have a corner on the market here in Meridian Township. So maybe we could invite him to a future Environmental Commission meeting or one of these conversations.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. So how do you spell his name? Is it Hauser?
Yep.
Or House, like Hauser?
Charles Hauser, I believe.
But with an A or an O?
A-U.
Okay.
Yep.
I was just trying to think about whether he had ever made a presentation in the Environmental Commission. The bad thing about being, I mean, I've been on the Environmental Commission for a long time, but I'm unfortunately a person with a non-functional memory. So I can't remember all the presentations we've had. Some of them have been, well, many of them have been excellent, but I'm not sure that we've had one from Granger in forever.
He replaced Phil Micus.
How long ago was that?
Phil, probably a couple years.
Okay.
And Phil retired. Tanya Olson has probably been to our Environmental Commission meeting. I know Granger has been, well, with the advent of the carts that have just rolled out this year. I know there's interest in getting the word out about what to put in your cart, what not to put in your cart, how to get a cart.
Recycling raccoons.
Yeah, right.
I love them, and now they're like the Corona poster child as well, because they wear a mask and they obsessively wash their hands.
Oh, interesting.
The trouble is, they're
Like the Lone
in our
Ranger.
world, the raccoons are invading the compost bin instead.
Yeah, I had one a couple weeks ago. I always tell people, I'm like, they're just like humans. They're super opportunists.
Right. Well,
They think we're doing that for them. I was wondering if, not to change the subject or anything.
That's okay.
Oh, Elaine, were you going to say something?
I did have a question.
You say
about
before I change anything.
Probably this is for Leroy. About Granger's recycling carts. Has there been any update now that they've distributed them in April and May? And when I talked to someone at Granger on the phone, they said, well, in the summer, we're going to institute a fee for those carts for the people that are on the bag tag program. The other people that were already paying for the recycling carts that have the trash cart, their fee will go away for the recycling cart, and the fee will go on to people who are doing the bag tag program.
Yeah, I haven't heard an update on that.
What I'm doing. So I'm just wondering, now it's July, and which is summer, and
you'll probably be the first to know, Elaine.
I'll get a bill. Yeah.
But I could probably find out. That's a good question.
Just wondered. Well, you don't need to ask, because if they forget about it, that's fine with me.
Yeah.
Okay, if I hear, I'll
I'm
let you
Delta
know.
Township, so I have no idea of anything.
Well, Granger's pretty big in Delta, right?
Yes. Yeah. Well, we have, I think, yeah, when we moved in, we got a recycling cart right away. And I don't believe we get charged for that. So is there going to be, do we get charged?
You might be eligible for the bag tag program. Granger does not promote it, but if you generate just
what is that?
A small bag a week of
what is that? Yeah.
of trash, they, as Elaine says, they are gonna, I think it's like $2 a bag. So
no wonder they don't promote it.
Right.
Doubled the price since I started doing it. The price has doubled on the bag tags.
Okay.
But it's still about, yeah.
And do you just put the bags out, or do you still have a cart?
$1.50 a bag to start. Now that it's about $3.
You just put the bag out, and then the point Elaine was making is that they're going to start charging for recycling of, I don't know what it is, $10 a month or $25 a month or something.
$12.50
a month.
A month, maybe.
But it still works out to be about half what you would pay with their regular service.
Right. Because I think we pay $55 every 3 months or 2 months. Because I don't get billed every month for that.
It's quarterly, probably.
Yeah.
I only put one.
I'll have to look into that.
Out probably every 6 weeks.
They may or may not offer it in Delta. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll check it out though.
Our houses are so close together. We actually just and our neighbor is a snowbird, so we just share the recycling and the trash with our neighbor.
That's cool. That's nice.
And it could be illegal too. I'm not sure.
A real shh.
We didn't hear anything.
Was it where I used to live? That was illegal.
Why would that be illegal?
Because there was a township ordinance.
Because they want more money.
Where I lived in Macomb County, that you couldn't remove the trash from the site of generation. We found that because we were all on single subscription at that time, like it is here. You hire your own trash company. But there was, 15 trash companies to choose from in Macomb County. So we had trucks all over the place every day of the week. And a lot of people were just pitching their trash in anybody's cart that was out there, and nobody knew who wasn't paying. And we found, and the price was so high. We were paying, 20 years ago, they were charging $65 a quarter, some of these companies, for trash service. And that didn't include recycling.
So you were going to say something, Emma,
No.
earlier?
Oh, yeah. So I live over by Kreitz and Lansing Road. So I live off of Old Lansing Road. And the BWL has a big like coal stack behind my house. It's that red and white striped one. And I just thought it was cool because last year actually I saw this video of them transporting and I wish I knew more about what the power generation actually is, but it's essentially, you know, a way for them to go off of the coal plant. And so they transported these huge generators that were made in Sweden, and they had to like have like a police like escort the whole way because these things are so huge and they're so heavy that they've set them down back there, and they're actually building the building around them that will house them. And so I didn't know, I mean, you know, obviously I can do a lot of research, but I didn't know if any of you had heard about that. And I mean, I think I'm really excited about it, especially because it's right behind my house. And, you know, me and my husband think about the air we're breathing from that area. I mean, there's an asphalt making factory too by us. So I just didn't know if anybody had heard of that. I thought that was a really interesting project they're taking on. I don't know if you've seen that.
Well, I know they're moving off of coal to natural gas. So those are probably natural gas.
Okay.
Fired.
How does that work? I don't know anything.
I actually toured the plant when it was a coal plant. It's a pretty amazing facility, and the generators in there that spin at like 1,400 revolutions per minute. Mm-hmm. It might be minute. It might be more than that. But anyway, it's just an amazing facility that you know, I should know more about how natural gas works, but basically I believe it boils.
That's how I feel though.
Boils water, and the steam goes through the generator, and it's like a kind of like a big jet engine.
That's kind of what they looked like, yeah.
Yeah, MSU did the same thing a while ago. They switched over from coal to natural gas, and part of it is that natural gas got super cheap. Unfortunately, part of that is because of fracking, but you know, it does alter the landscape in terms of and frankly, from a carbon intensity point of view, natural gas is much better. And it's cleaner, it's less carbon intensive than coal, and it doesn't have all the crud that coal has in it, like mercury and other things, and you know, particulate emissions. So from that point of view, it's much better. What disappoints me about the whole thing is that, you know, when they put in, I just pulled up an article about the BWL thing. So, you know, they're calling this a half a billion dollar project. When they invest that kind of money, you know, they're committed to it for decades. And so that's still fossil based.
Right.
But it's still, you know, from an emissions point of view and so forth, it's still way better than coal. The trouble is it allows them to say, look, we're doing better than coal. But they're still committed to a fossil origin fuel.
Well, and I think that's what my question was, because I like you said, Leroy, I wish I should know more about this stuff, but you know, I've heard so many mixed reviews on natural gas. So for me, I'm like, should I be excited, or is it something that, and you know, that is disappointing that it's still fossil fuel, because to me, that's so old school and not long-term. But
well, it is still way cleaner, and of course you don't have to have, you know, rail cars. You don't have to have the logistical. I mean, coal. You can't send coal through pipelines, and gas pipelines are a little less scary than oil pipelines. I mean, I know we're all, you know, there's talking about the Mackinac Straits pipeline, things like that. I mean, an oil spill
Ugh.
is a really awful thing. A gas leak can be a bad thing. I don't know if you guys ever noticed the story in Massachusetts when houses started blowing up.
Oh.
There
I
was
think
a
I have heard of that.
I'm from Massachusetts, so I had some friends who didn't have their own house blow up, but it was their town.
Wow,
Uh,
that's crazy.
that was just a pressure spike, I guess, or at least some kind of a screw up in the management of the pressure of the gas lines, but that doesn't normally happen. But an oil spill, of course, is a horrendous thing.
Yeah, and like, I mean, stuff like that happens more than people even realize. Because when I worked at Waldemar, there's an area and it feeds right into the Grand River, and it was an area that I was trying to use as a restoration project, but it has 3 different drains that go into it, and like one is residential and one like came from the Meyer and the Coke plant over in that area. And there was 3 times in the year that I worked there that we called the DEQ, or actually 2 people were public people walking the trails, because there's oil in the water. You know, and there was a spill there from BP, like I think 2 or 3 years before I started. And when the DEQ came out, they're like, yeah, I mean, this is probably some oil in in the lagoon, and it would run out to the Grand River. And, you know, they were so like nonchalant about it in a way of like, the guy was like, yeah, we actually deal with this a lot. And it's like, oh, that's disappointing. Like,
So BP
so
as in like a gas station, or
apparently, or no, maybe it wasn't BP, it was Meyer. Meyer had some sort of spill into Waldemar's drainage area, and
Oh man.
I think they gave like some money to it, but my whole idea was like, let's have them set up this area as a restoration site and they should fund this.
yeah, right.
And well, because I had like researched, like they have those like crazy drainage socks, because there was like a lot of microplastics too, and like small pieces of plastic getting into that area, because like the Meyer semis, like they have those tags for when they open the semi, and there was like hundreds of those down there, and I'd always have the kids cleaning up that area. But you know, to me, I was like, we need to make those companies more responsible for those areas, and they definitely have the money, but it doesn't work that way a lot.
Little bits and pieces like that. I mean, our culture, you know, I mean, think about in the days when there were more smokers around, people just threw their cigarettes on the ground and stomped on them, and that was their disposal. And it was just sort of assumed that, well, whatever, you know, that's not pollution. That's not a litter.
Right.
It's so little, it'll just whatever dry up and go.
And I was reading too on like it takes quite a long time for cigarette butts to break down, I guess.
Yeah.
So it's like,
especially if they have the plastic filter tip on them.
yeah, right. Then that takes a really long time.
Grillos or whatever they were. Yeah.
You know, to me, you know, we're pretty well informed consumers, and you know, it's a little scary that the average consumer doesn't necessarily know where their energy comes from, or doesn't have a clue about necessarily paper versus plastic. It'd be cool to maybe capture some of these ideas and think about how we can share them more systematically, and not necessarily that we have to convert people to our way of life or anything, but just helping people understand these things, and the complexity, and that there's not necessarily a good or a bad way, but if you want to do zero waste, here's some options.
Well, and there are definite consequences, like you were saying, Emma, that, you know, I mean, air quality, you know, from coal, I mean, that's an obvious one, but that there are obvious advantages to, and definitely in the social justice category too, you know, improving things that don't expose people to whatever crud in their air, especially, but also crud in their water, etc. You know, the Flint story is just amazing. It was just, you know, it's just embarrassing that something that we take for granted so easily. Water, clean water, actually isn't guaranteed to anybody. So yeah.
Yeah. One of my favorite lessons I used to do was the groundwater model lesson, where we'd show kids, you know, we'd dump different food color pollutants in and we'd pull out of the well, and they'd get to see like, oh yeah, just because your water comes out of the tap does not mean anything, unfortunately. I wonder if we could do like I guess in speaking in the terms of like grocery like waste and like plastic bags versus or like having produce bags instead of the plastic ones at the store. I wonder if that's something we could do with local businesses and maybe even set up like a little booth outside, or I don't know, maybe we could get some cute little kids or like once schools get back in session. I don't know if that could be like an Earth Club project or something, to just have an informational booth outside of the local Kroger or the local Meijer. And I don't know how they would feel about that, but
what would we be promoting?
I guess just like information, like resources for people to understand more about these issues, to have more awareness. And maybe those aren't the best places, but also I'm just trying to think, you know, how do you get this information out in the community? Because that's the thing. I mean, even all of us, we're very aware, and we still struggle with certain issues, or we may not have all the information we need. So I think it's just a matter of, it's like how people always text me pictures of plants and bugs, which, because I love it and I'll look it up. I don't always know what that thing is, but I have the interest to look it up. And so I think there's just a disconnect for people, where if they're not passionate about it, they're probably, you know, they want the answers right there, or they want the information right there. So I don't know.
Well, they also, I think, need a financial incentive. I mean, and there are perceptions too. You know, it's not exactly the same issue, but when I talk to my neighbors, so I live in Hazlitt, and you know, Hazlitt and Okemos are relatively prosperous communities, et cetera. And you know, sometimes I ride the bus or I ride my bicycle, but most people in these communities they might see the bus, they know what a cata bus looks like, but it's never crossed their mind to actually take it. That's you know, that's the way the poor people travel, or however you want to think it. That's the mindset. And so how do you actually get people to sort of cross that threshold and at least experience it once or twice and recognize these kinds of options as alternative ways of doing things? And I think that's either, you know, you can either make clear that there's a tremendous opportunity for money savings. That's one strategy. You know, you can appeal to the people's desire to be good, but unfortunately that, you know, that's often trumped by just plain, you know, efficiency or their, you know, time savings, whatever. And then you go into Meijer's and you buy, you know, whatever, a bunch of whatever scallions or something like that. And the way you have to carry them up to the counter is, you know, I mean, there's that little roll of plastic bags for every single vegetable you buy.
Yeah.
I like the idea of the tree planting project, the idea, kind of the general idea that, okay, here's something you can do that makes a difference, that's positive, that's easy to do. And maybe there's some similar types of things, and we could sort of be like a clearinghouse of ideas of, okay, here's some things that you can do to reduce plastic waste that might even save you some money. But just having more of a systematic way to get those words out through maybe the table at the farmer's market. Green Gazette is something I'm always working on. We're trying to get better at social media outreach. Love to draw other people into that. And Home TV is also talking about sort of a series of environmental themes over the different months. So maybe July would be water saving. And then December might be energy. or October might be recycling or whatever. So I'm just thinking, how do we share some of these ideas, but also involve others?
Yeah, I was actually talking to, is her name Jennifer? I think her name is Jennifer. She knits the really beautiful blankets at the market right now, and she's been making masks. And I was asking her if she had the ability to actually make produce bags that people could buy at the market to use, or there's at least that getting out there. And we also kind of talked about how it's kind of the crowd for, because that's the thing, like we've talked about many times, with social justice. And if you don't have, if you're struggling to put food on the table, you're not going to think about those other environmental things all the time. I mean, you have to be able to take care of yourself first before you can really set your mind on some of these really big issues. And so I think we had talked about that the market is a really good place because, we do know that most of this community is pretty affluent. And so I think it's really important to also try to start at those platforms as well, to get, those people in on it too. Cause I mean, that would be something really cool if we could, like, I'm always trying to think of like how we can include like local small business too in what we're doing, because especially like right now with all the crap that they've been through these past few months. And so I don't know, that's kind of a thought. I mean, a lot of people have come out to make masks and sell them, and it's like, if you can make a mask, you can probably make a bag.
Yeah.
You reminded me, Emma, that my grandmother used to carry a string bag everywhere. And people used to use those, not, before we had plastic bags or cloth tote bags even. Yeah. They would make a string bag, and it would be, crocheted or something, I suppose.
Yeah.
A loosely made bag that you could, almost like the mesh bags that you see today that are plastic, but it was made of string, and every household had a ball of string. It was a staple in your kitchen because you use string for everything. And
yeah, that's a good.
Instead of using, tape or twist ties, people would tie string around to hold things together. And
as soon as the researchers discover that the masks are actually toxic, we're going to have a whole bunch of masks that we could sew into produce bags.
Yes, as long as they're disinfected first. No, but I have seen lots of different tutorials on how to just easily make a little produce bag with an old shirt or an old pillowcase. And so I don't know, those are good things to put on social media. I mean, that's something that we could put on like the green page and that, but I think the people who are already following those pages though are the people who are trying to look for those green initiatives. And so I think, in my vision, I'm like, I want to get those people who aren't following the green page. Right. And so like, if we can do some cool, like maybe DIY tutorials like that, or like you were saying, I mean, my produce bags are just those drawstring ones, and you can throw them in the compost when you're done with them. But yeah, I think those are some interesting.
There's another thing I just recalled when we started talking about plastic bags. I was telling the others before you came on that I had been to Ted Black Woods this morning, and there's no trash cans there that I saw.
I noticed that yesterday.
I wasn't looking for a can, and I said, well, it's a good thing there's no cans here, because then people would just fill them up. But there is a small picnic area though,
and there is a small pile of trash out there.
Yeah, well,
that people have kind of put in the corner. And
go on the overlook over the little pond, down over the railing, there's like a pop can and a couple of chip bags down there. But underneath the sign, people had left a couple of neatly tied up dog poop bags, I noticed.
Yeah.
So I'm going, geez. They go to all the
I
trouble
s-
to collect it and
Right, of bagging them up and then they
Yeah.
go home. Yeah, I see that along the
So
interurban too.
there. I'm going,
I
what?
wanted to talk to Katie about this before because I've noticed the same thing out at Ted Blackwoods, and I saw the poop bags yesterday. And I mean, I've taken my dog's poop bag with me from Ted Blackwoods.
Yeah.
It's pretty gross, but I mean, you just throw it in your trunk and you just throw it out as soon as you can. And but I have noticed a lot of trash out there. In fact, I have a volunteer starting this week who's going to just do trash pickup at the parks and preserves.
Oh, cool.
Oh, also on a cool note, when I was out at Ted Blackwoods, I found American ginseng,
Oh,
which is a threatened species.
I don't even know what it looks like, but I should look that
don't
up.
tell anybody where.
I hadn't seen it in the wild before that, so I didn't know what it looked like in the except from a picture. But it's something that you can harvest and take, so that's a big reason why you also don't see it a lot, because people do dig it up and use it.
Well,
but I'll talk about the possibility, because Ted Black is a park, so like at preserves we don't put trash cans out because they don't follow the same rules as the park, and they're kind of more like the grounds crew does not visit those places as often to take care of stuff like trash. So, Ted Black could be a good candidate for a trash can. I mean, they're already going around to other places and picking it up. Because basically every time I've gone out there, I've seen trash by that post. Like they're just like laying it there like, oh, somebody will come pick this up.
You brought it with you. You can't take it with you.
Yeah,
I
right.
know.
Yeah,
there's that whole
I mean, my
thing.
car's full of trash.
amazing. It didn't occur to me to pick it up, but I didn't want to handle it actually.
Right.
Or I might have.
Well,
Yeah,
as
you never
usual,
know.
this has been a hour chock full of cool ideas. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. And
Been a whole hour already.
any parting comments from anybody?
I think we need a way to make string bags out of invasive vine type species.
Yes, Oriental bittersweet. We've got a lot of it in the township.
Right. So pull it, and then you need a weaving machine that you can feed it into. Make your string bag, your biodegradable string bags.
That would be so awesome.
Have them available at the doorway to Myers or whatever.
That's amazing. Actually, we were just talking last week about starting to make paper for our office out of Phragmites.
Yeah, sure. Why not? Right. Just throw it in the blender and then
Yeah.
spread it on
Exactly. Now there's something with this.
My PhD advisor's wife was an artist, and she actually had a whole paper making activity, which was the paper was remarkably good. She just did it by hand. She ground it up. And,
what's her name? Jen?
No, this is way back in New Jersey 30 years ago.
Okay.
But I don't know. Who knows how easy that would be? It'd be sort of interesting.
Well, we have actually she's a resident in Meridian now, and her husband I think is a wildlife biologist or fisheries biologist.
Huh.
And she has been doing for years because she's a photographer, and she makes paper out of invasive species, and she said Phragmites is the best one to use. And then she takes a silhouette picture of an endangered or threatened native plant, and she shadow casts it onto the invasive species paper.
Wow.
Oh, that's cool.
It's a really cool project. Yeah.
Yeah.
But she actually just moved into town, and so I just talked to her on the phone a couple weeks ago, and
some of
so
these
if you
ideas,
do want to do that, talk to her.
some of these ideas could be real income generators.
Yeah.
Create your own small business.
Yeah.
I mean, as people are looking to diversify, and there's just so many ideas that have come up, some of which could be very useful and interesting to people.
Yeah, absolutely. This is why these conversations are fun.
I love the idea of a bioactive paper that you could say, well, this paper is self-sterilizing and, it kills the COVID. I was actually asking some doctor friends of mine, if anything is known about we're so focused on cleaning surfaces with some kind of chemical agent, soap or whatever, but what about, surfaces, just natural surfaces that accumulate whatever, fungi, bacteria, things like that, that are all over everything and everybody, not bad things, just the natural glop that ends up on surfaces. How much of that stuff is something that just sort of digests potential pathogens? It's an interesting question. We tend not to think of ourselves as ecosystems, and we don't think of our surfaces as ecosystems either, but there is, we could think that way. So if you had a paper,
absolutely.
if your invasive species paper turned out to be, suitably toxic to the virus,
I'll get working on that research right now. No, but I do think it is a very interesting avenue to go down.
And there are all sorts of famous, uses of plants, right? Anyway.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, right. We could come up with invasive trash bags.
Well, is it knotweed? One of them is allelopathic, right?
There's quite a few. Japanese knotweed is honeysuckle, autumn olive, garlic mustard, Dame's rocket.
Yeah, so these things are actually exuding, chemicals that discourage growth, discourage life by other plants. So you never know.
Maybe they could be discouraging coronavirus.
Yeah, and in another 20 years, we'll be also inoculating ourselves with all the microorganisms that we've deprived ourselves from, realizing that our life is dependent upon the microbial kingdom.
When we were young, we ate our respective pecks of dirt, right?
Yeah. That's why this whole thing is hard for me, because I grew up on a farm, and it's just like, I always use grass as a napkin, so that's what I do.
I was wondering what those green stains are around your cheek there, Emma.
Just washing my face this morning. Well, good talking to all of you.
Yeah, it's been fun. Thanks a lot, everybody.
Yeah, everybody take care. Be safe.
Okay, see ya.
Bye.